My name is Drew Tompkins, as Karen so wonderfully introduced me. I am a consultant here at Affinity Consulting. I specialize in document management consulting. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the supercharging your Worldox scanning solution with a product called Symphony Profiler. Just to start off, Symphony Profiler is a product that is sold by Trumpet Software Incorporated. It is specifically designed to integrate with an existing Worldox system to allow you to maximize your ability to scan documents, hard copy documents, directly into Worldox by use of a cover sheet and a profiler processor process. So in this presentation, what I'm going to be taking you through is giving you a brief description of how that system works on the back end, and then we'll also be looking at some examples in real life. Obviously, with the current situation that we're in, we find ourselves a lot of people working from home. So there's potentially not a lot of people that are actually working in office that have access to either desktop scanners or the large multifunction devices that we would typically use. So in this scenario, using Symphony Profiler with your existing Worldox document management system, what you would do would be to create a set of cover sheets that have barcodes on them that you could then put in front of a scanned job, a stack of physical documents that you would then feed into that scanner. And by use of Symphony Profiler, it's going to read those cover sheets, and then based on a reservation that you've already made in Worldox, so preemptively, you go into Worldox, you create that reservation that says where this document is headed, the title of the document, and you apply a profile to it. So just as if you were actually profiling a real document, except you're doing it as a reservation. So then what happens is that you scan those documents, and you can do either a single document or you can do a batch of documents separated by these cover sheets, and then they will all be processed by Symphony Profiler and then profiled according to that profile that you put on that document. So let's walk through the process or walk through the construction of how this is done, and then we'll get into some examples. So the first thing that we're going to look at is what are the different aspects of Worldox plus Symphony. So the first thing are what we talked about, the reservations. So reservations, as I said, are essentially like a pre-profile that you put on a document. So when you go into Worldox, when you have the Symphony Profiler integrated with Worldox, you have the opportunity to create that reservation. So as I said previously, that reservation is very much a profile that you're going to put into this document in an expectation of it being scanned in to the system. The next part is that cover sheet. So in order to create the reservation, you first have to generate a cover sheet. These cover sheets are automatically generated by Symphony, and I will show you the process of creating those new cover sheets. Those cover sheets come with a 5-digit code that you take that cover sheet, the physical cover sheet, and you type in that 5-digit code when you're making your reservation, and then that corresponds to the document that you're then going to be scanning in, and which will automatically be profiled into the appropriate location in Worldox. The fourth application for this is utilizing this to do batch scanning. So as I said, you don't have to do this one document at a time. If you have, a stack of 5 documents, multi-page documents, that you want to go through and say, all right, I'm going to create 5 different cover sheets. I'm going to profile each one of these documents using the reservation system. And then you just take all of those cover sheets or all of those documents separated by the cover sheets, you throw them into your scanner, and then when they all scan through, it's going to read those individual cover sheets and then appropriately profile those into the correct location within Worldox. So what this does is this enhances your efficiency. So it really gives you the opportunity to, rather than having to get up and walk to the copier or the scanner to scan in those documents, you have the opportunity to actually go in and do an entire stack at once, thus minimizing the amount of time and effort that you have to use to get up and walk to your other location. Or if you're using desktop scanners, it will save you the trouble of having to repeat the job over and over again when you can just knock it all out at once, insert all of those documents, scan them in, and have them profiled automatically. So let's look at the Symphony Profiler and how the architecture works within your system. So the first portion of this is the Profiler Workstation. So on the back end, we actually install what's known as the Symphony Profiler processor. And so that's installed on your existing Worldox Indexer PC. For the individual user, we're going to install what's called the Symphony Profiler Workstation. It's this component that actually allows you to generate the cover sheets, and it is that which integrates with Worldox so that you can profile those documents into their correct location within the appropriate document repository. The next aspect of this is the scans folder. So once you've created that profile and you have then associated your cover sheet with that reservation that you've made, when you go to scan that document, it's actually going to scan into whatever your designated scans folder is. So what happens is that the Symphony Profiler processor is going to be monitoring that scans folder. So anytime something comes in, it's going to look at those scanned documents and it's going to read them, quote unquote, to find those cover sheets and analyze those barcodes that you have on those cover sheets, and then associate them with those reservations that you've previously made in Worldox. The final aspect of this is what we spoke about already, and that's the profile processor. So that's the heart of the operation. So that's what sits on the Indexer PC. That's what actually communicates with Worldox, and that's what actually goes out, grabs those documents, profiles them appropriately, and then moves them physically from that scans folder, which it's monitoring, into its appropriate location within your Worldox document repository. So to give you an example, just in the abstract, I have a document that should go into the Sam Smith file. I've created my reservation. I've scanned it in with that reservation cover sheet that I've created. It then, from the scanner, it sends it to the default scans folder that we're monitoring using the Worldox Profiler processor. It reads that barcode and it says, I see that this is barcode ABCDE. That's awesome. I see that there's a reservation for ABCDE that needs to go into the Sam Smith file. It needs to go into his estate planning file, and this document needs to go in as correspondence. So then it all goes through and completes that process behind the scenes without any additional intervention by you or your users to actually put that document into its correct location within Worldox. So with that being said, let's actually go to see this in action. So it's all fine and good to discuss this in the abstract, but I think that it's better if we actually see this actually going. So I'm going to transfer over to my demo machine, and we will actually see how this process works. Now, so full disclosure, because of the necessity to work from home, I'm not going to be working with an actual scanner. So we're going to be sort of fudging that a little bit by essentially doing all of the scanning in a demonstrative way that will then replicate the process that would happen if you were actually scanning into a default folder. So let's start by going into Worldox. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Worldox desktop, which you see right here. And once you have Symphony installed, you'll see that you have a menu item here that's called Symphony Imaging. And so you have a couple of options here at the very top. One is Create Covers, and one is Create Reservation. So the Create Covers option is where we actually go in and say, hey, I need to create a cover sheet that I want to then associate with this document. So if I make that selection here, you'll see that it prompts me and says, hey, how many cover sheets do you want to go ahead and create? And you'll also notice that it says, make sure that you print them on light colored paper and reuse them. So all of this is to, get us into a more paperless society, theoretically. So what you have the option to do is actually go in and reuse the cover sheets on multiple occasions. So once the cover sheets are created within the system, it's actually gone ahead and said, okay, this is a valid ID, and it's going to look for it the next time you create a reservation, which we'll do in just a second. So at this point, it says, hey, how many covers do you need? By default, I've got it configured to say 5 covers. So if I click OK at this point, it's going to go out and it's going to create 5 different PDF documents that are cover sheets that I could then print out and use as my reservation cover sheets for my scanning. So just to give you an example of that, if I go ahead and click OK, you'll see that what happens is that it creates these cover sheets. So here's an idea of what that cover sheet looks like. So you have your barcode at your top, your barcode at your bottom. You have your 5-digit identifier here. So FWE is going to be the cover sheet or the reservation code that I'm going to put in when I'm creating that reservation. You'll also see that it has some instructions here for your users. So just as a reminder, it says, hey, make sure that you go to Symphony Profiler to create your reservation, which we'll be looking at in just a moment. Match this cover sheet to the document to be scanned. So that's just saying, hey, make sure that the reservation that you create corresponds with the document that you're putting this cover page on. And then finally, put the document in the to be scanned stack. So if you have I love this instruction because it's just telling you, hey, make sure that you put it in a place that you're going to then either someone else is going to pick up and scan it, or you're going to then scan it. The second set of instructions is the instruction for the filer. So make sure that you scan the cover sheet along with the corresponding document. So just sort of a restating of number 2 on the instructions for the profiler. And then number 2 on the instructions for the filer, make sure that you save the scan file to the Symphony Profile input folder. So essentially that's saying if you need to select a folder to be the destination for these files, make sure you go ahead and make that selection. And he also says any file name is okay. So if you're using a multifunction device, a big Canon copier or a Ricoh, any of those, Xerox, and you have a default naming scheme that you put on your documents, there's no need to modify that in this system. As long as the destination directory that you are scanning to is readable by the Symphony Profiler folder, then it will disregard what the name is of the default naming scheme that you put on those scan documents, and it will go in and look at that initial page so that it'll look at this cover sheet so that it can then appropriately associate it with the reservation that you've created within Worldox. So again, it tells you, hey, make sure that you print it on yellow paper to indicate that they are a different document than just a standard white. I've seen people use white paper, yellow paper, a light cyan. Basically, it just needs to be something that you have a high enough contrast between what you see on the cover sheet text and the color of the page. So we've created these cover sheets using that create cover sheet option under my Symphony imaging menu item here within Worldox. The next thing that we're going to look at is actually creating the reservation. So I took the opportunity to actually go through and create a set of cover sheets that I'm going to be using for this demonstration. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and you can actually see that here, I have a sample PDF that I've created, and just imagine that this has this is an actual physical document that I am getting ready to scan into the system. So you see I have my cover sheet on top with my my code, the actual barcode at the top at the bottom that it uses to then scan into the system. And then finally, we have just some text. So this is just some standard lorem ipsum document information that really is fake Latin, if you will. So now I have this PDF document. You see that I've named it sample PDF here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a reservation for this particular document. So I have gone into my Symphony imaging menu. I'm going to hit create reservation. And so now you see what happens is that Worldox opens up what's known as the create reservation page. And it's very much like what you see when you're actually profiling a document into Worldox, because in essence, that's what you're doing. Instead of profiling the actual document, you are associating this profile with a placeholder, a bookmark, a reservation. So that when the Symphony Profiler processor reads that reservation, that scanned document that we're going to put in, it's going to say, hey, cool, let me go ahead and profile this document, and it's going to apply all of this information that we fill in at this point into my reservation. So I'm going to call this sample doc 44444 for my description. For those of you familiar with Worldox, which I hope all of you are, you'll know that if I hit my enter key at this point, I could put in some comments. So I can say sample single scan on 430. So put some additional comments in there. And then at this point, I would fill in my client and matter information. So I could do it via my favorites that I have listed here on my left-hand side of my reservation screen. I can utilize my quick profiles if I have that, or I can just manually browse through my cabinets to find my destination for this particular reservation. I'm going to go through and use my favorite matters. I'm going to put it into my Nathan management client and put it into the general matter. I'm going to double click on there. You'll see that it's automatically filled that in. I'm going to associate it with a document type. I'm going to say that this is a correspondence. And so now I have all of my information filled in for my reservation. One thing that I will draw your attention to down at the bottom, we actually have a save as type. So you'll see that it's saving it as a .xpf folder. You never need to modify this, because if you change this, it actually invalidates that reservation. So at this point, all that you would need to do would be to hit OK. If this is going to be a new version of a document, you do have the option to go ahead and create some additional versioning options for this. You can add categories to this document. You can relate this file to a different file within Worldox. You can add security. So all of your normal Worldox options that you have, you can go ahead and use during this reservation process. You also have your copy metadata from. So if you have another document that you want to copy that metadata from to pull into this particular reservation, you can do that using this button as well. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to create that reservation. And the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, what's the reservation ID from the cover sheet? So if we go back and look at my sample document, here's my cover sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, so the cover sheet that I'm actually using is my XCMNM. All right, great. So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to type that in. I'm actually going to copy and paste it just to make sure I don't mistype something. And so then you'll see that I have three options down at the bottom. One is to create another similar. So essentially that just means if I have a stack of these reservations and I want to go through and do a whole series at the time, I can go ahead and use that another similar button, and it's going to accept this reservation that I've made, or and it's going to then allow me to enter another reservation ID. I can do another, which actually just gives me a brand new blank profile that I can then fill out for the reservation, or I can click OK, because in this instance, we're doing a single document. Just going to click OK, and I'm going to create this reservation using this particular document ID. You'll also notice I have the option to print cover sheet. So if at this point I've gone into the process, I've filled out my reservation profile, but I realized, oh, I didn't actually create any cover sheets. You could actually click on this link, and within this menu, you have the option to then create print cover sheets at this point that you could grab from the printer and then enter in that reservation ID to complete this reservation. But for our purposes right now, I'm going to click OK. It's going to create that reservation. It's now sitting in Worldox as that .xpf folder, waiting for Symphony to go and find that scan from the scan folder destination, and then import it into Worldox and profile it appropriately. So in order to replicate that scanning process, what I'm going to do is actually do a file and a save as on this document. I'm going to save it to my Symphony scans folder. So this is the designated scan folder that I'm using. So you'll see that it is a local folder here. So this would be as if I were using a desktop scanner, for instance. For your firm, it might be that you're sending this document to a designated scans folder that's saved on the network. Either way is great. But for my purposes, we're just going to pretend like I'm using a desktop scanner. So I'm going to go ahead and call this sample 0001, and I'm going to hit save. And so now it's gone ahead and it's saved this document as sample 001 PDF with that cover sheet. And so now we're going to go and we're going to look at our Symphony Profiler screen. So you'll see that's what happens is we have 4 quadrants to this profile processor screen. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the top left-hand corner. So you'll see that here is that reservation ID that I created. Here's the date and the time. The user is me, my username is Affinity. And then it actually has where my location is. So where is the actual profile going to go? So you'll see that what's happened is that it's actually given me an error. So let's see. It's saying that it's gone through, it's read that file, and it's actually saying that there's no reservation found in that file. So let me go back and try that one more time. While I'm doing that, I just want to point your attention to the other 2 quadrants that we have on this screen. So the bottom tab here shows my recently filled reservations. So this just gives me a list of all of those reservations that have actually successfully completed. And then the bottom right-hand corner actually shows me the information that I have on the status of what's been done in the Symphony Profiler. So let's see what we need to do here. So let me make sure that I have my scans folder running, which it is running. It's doing my background transfer. So bear with me one second, folks, and let's see what we can do to get this to work. So let me open back up my sample document there and see if we can't get this to work appropriately. So bear with me one second here. So let's go to this guy, make sure that's the right one. Yes, it is. So I'm going to open this up in my, and again, this is because I'm trying to shoehorn in this demonstration in a not ideal environment in terms of I'm not actually using a real scanner. So sometimes it gets a little confused. So let me see if I can try this again and make this work a little bit better. So I'm going to save this to my Symphony scans folder, and I'm going to call it sample copy 1. Perfect. And I'm going to save it as a PDF file. And that should be good. So it acts as if that it is actually scanned that document, and it should be good to go. So let's see if we can actually process this now and make it work. So it still shows my reservation in there. So it should go out and find that document and then bring it into the system. So go ahead and tell it to process now. Analyzing. Let me go ahead and double click on this and see. Yeah, sample 001. There's the cover sheet. Well, beans. All right, so let's try this one more time. So I'm actually going to go ahead and move to a different set of documents here. So this is actually going to be a demonstration of how we can do batch scanning. This is another example of a series of cover sheets that I've actually created and scanned into the system. So here we have the first cover sheet, the first document that it applies to, and you see it's a multi-page document. And then here's my second cover sheet. So this is if I've taken a whole stack of documents and I am all scanning them in at the same time. So you'll see that there's yet another one here, and then another multi-page document, and then yet another cover sheet for my final document that I have in here as well. So what I'm going to do is actually do a file save as here at this point. I'm going to save this document again into my Symphony Scans folder, and I'm going to call it Sample Scans and Documents 01. I'm going to drop it into that Symphony Scans folder. Oh, not quite yet, because I forgot a very important step. And that step is I'm going to create my reservation. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to hit my reservations here, and I'm going to say all of these go into the same location. So I'm going to say that they all go into that Nathan management file. They're all correspondence. And I'm going to say first description is test to delete 1. And I'm going to say OK. And so at this point, we have this same operation here where it's going to ask me for a reservation ID from the cover sheet. So I did a little cheating here, and I found that first reservation ID that I created. I'm going to enter it in there. And so now here I have the option to do another similar or another. So if I hit another similar, you'll see that it's actually going to bring in that same information that I created on that profile. So say, for instance, this is going to be test delete 2. But instead of going into the same client and matter as a correspondence, I'm actually going to make this an agreement. So now I have the opportunity to modify that profile and say, OK, and now I can say, all right, my second document is AEH F7. So I'm going to copy and paste that ID into my reservation, and then I can hit another. So at this point, I'm going to get a fresh reservation screen. So now you see that I don't have any of that previous information filled in. I could go into my general file for my Marilyn Metzler file, and I can select that this is a correspondence, give this a test name, test delete 3. Say OK, and then give that a reservation ID. And then I'm going to do another similar. And then I am going to say that this is test delete 4. And we're going to keep it in the in Marilyn's file, and we're going to say OK. And then I'm going to associate that last reservation code that I have in here. So let me go ahead and grab that. And then if I go into my reservation, I'm going to add that reservation, and then I'm going to say OK. So now I've put in all of my reservations. I've created my I've got my stack of documents that I am then going to go through and scan. So in the theater of the mind, we've gone to the scanner. We've scanned in all of these documents. I'm going to go ahead and say that when I save this, this is actually going to save that document into the monitoring folder. So now, fingers crossed, we go in and we see here's all of those reservations that we actually created. And then we should see in just a moment when it processes those documents, all of those will get sucked into the system and profiled appropriately. So we'll give it a few seconds to go through and find that. So it found the new reservations. We can see here in that bottom quadrant. And then we should see here in just a moment it processing all of those documents, at which point we should see all of those reservations fulfilled here down at the bottom. So let me just see if I can move this along a little bit. So it's going through. It is processing. Heartbeat sent. You can also see here, just in looking at the history on the activity log that we have here, we can see where it says it recognizes that it generated those cover pages, and then it actually then is scanned the reservation. It found the reservation here, and it is analyzing the documents to input those, and it should be processing those documents in. But it looks like it's being a little pokey for some reason. I was having a little bit of trouble there. But just to give you an example of what this looks like when it is actually completed, we are going to go in and look at a previous copy of a document that I've put in. So you'll see that I had in my recently fulfilled reservations here a list of my documents that I have actually input. So I'm going to go in and double click on this, and you'll see that it's actually going to open that document in my PDF viewer, and you'll see that this document has actually been filed to the appropriate location, and it's actually removed that cover sheet. So it's not like you have a PDF form that has that cover sheet that's come into the document itself. Part of the profiling and inputting process is where it's actually gone through and removed that cover sheet and then integrated that document into the system. So if I were to go, for instance, into my Worldox system here, and if I just did a refresh on my last search to look at all of my new documents that were created, you'll see that I have, here are all of those documents that were imported into the system. So my sample batch 1, sample batch 2, sample batch 3, all exist here. They're all profiled appropriately. They all have the correct modified date. They have additional versions if it went through and scanned them again to indicate that it's a second version, if it already existed in the system. And you can see that I can simply just double click that document within Worldox, and it brings up that system, or brings up that scanned document, easy as you like. So that's a nice broad demonstration of how the Symphony Profiler works. I just also want to point out to you, you see here all the XPF files that were created. So these are all the reservation files. For some reason, my profile system is not actually reading those right now, but it does process these documents and then bring them into Worldox with that appropriate profile. So if you have any questions, I appreciate your time. That is what I have for a demonstration here. Karen, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and we'll go ahead and wrap things up. I appreciate your time and attention, everyone who attended.
Great. Thank you, Drew. What a cool new tool. So thanks for sharing it with us. Great job. And
Thank you
thanks to all
very
of
much.
you for attending. If you were intrigued by Drew's presentation this afternoon and want to learn more about Symphony Profiler or have other document management questions, I encourage you to take advantage of our free 30-minute DMS consultation. This is your chance to speak with one of the DMS experts at Affinity and get those nagging questions answered. Just reply to the follow-up email I'm about to send, and I'll do the rest. We have more DMS focused sessions coming soon. On May 5th, we continue our DMS series by exploring how to integrate your DMS with PDF software. And we've added a new webinar on May 7th called How COVID-19 is Shifting the Legal Culture. But that should actually be an amazing, great session. So I hope you can join us. You can find information about that session and all of our upcoming webinars by jumping on to affinityconsulting.com/webinars. Please do share your feedback with us on the survey that follows, and join us again soon. Thanks, everyone.